Nope, it's going to be too much there.
Okay. You okay?
I was saying without sunglasses, this is going to be a tough picture.
All right. Well, listen, good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to everyone here in Port Hawkesbury and Cape Breton Council on my riding. I'm Mike Kelloway. I'm the Member of Parliament, proud member of this riding, and I'll be your MC for the event today. One of the things I'll notice or mention to you is that I have a long list of dignitaries to recognize, and then I realize that most of you are here, and then there are more dignitaries than we thought, which is great news. But I want to recognize, the towns and the municipalities, the First Nations communities, the private sector that is here, and all those that will be within the supply chain in a burgeoning new industry that we'll speak to in just a little bit. And it's more than just a pleasure to be here. I'm very proud to be here, to be a part of an important announcement, along with my colleague, Jaime Battiste, MP for Sydney, Victoria. And with that, I'll ask Jaime to come up for an opening welcome and a land acknowledgement.
Gwe, Jalasi, Odasi, the Gwe will not giskuk. Gdu Loidan Diljigalug Nog, Ginusia giskuk, Sama. Mr. Dignitary Ach, Odasi giskuk, Mautaskadi, Jitula, Eganawadaran. Greetings, everyone. Welcome. I'm not going to attempt to go through all the dignitaries. As Mike said, we've got so many people here for such a great announcement. It's my duty as a member of Parliament for Sydney, Victoria, and a member of the Mi'kmaq Nation to acknowledge the land that we are on today, the island of Unama'ki, which is part of the 7 districts of Mi'kmaq. I'd like to welcome you. We are all treaty people under the peace and friendship treaties signed between the Crown and the Mi'kmaq between 1725 and 1786. It's an amazing thing to be here today, to welcome Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, and to be here with my colleague Mike Kelloway for such an amazing announcement. And without further ado, I'll let us get to that amazing announcement. Thank you. Malalio.
Thanks, Jaime. I'll also say, I mentioned the municipalities and the towns and First Nations communities and private sector and other businesses that are part of this. I'd also like to recognize the work of the provincial government for their collaboration and their efforts on renewable energy and green hydrogen. In no uncertain terms, unlocking the potential of hydrogen is a key part of Canada's plan for a sustainable economic future. Hydrogen will play a key role in decarbonizing Canada's energy system and meeting global energy needs. Canada and Germany both recognize the massive opportunity presented by hydrogen. That's clean fuel, a clean fuel energy source that builds on existing strengths and simultaneously supports energy security and very important climate objectives. And as many of you know here, interest in hydrogen's potential as a widespread low-carbon energy carrier, it's not new. Experts have been researching its potential as a zero-emissions energy source for many years, but what is new? It's the breadth of possibilities for hydrogen use, the depth of the political will to utilize hydrogen to its full potential in Canada and around the world. So without further ado, let's get to the matter at hand. Please join me in welcoming Canada's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, the Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson.
Thank you very much. Bonjour tout le monde. It is great to be back in Cape Breton. I often say I am the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, but I'm also the Member of Parliament for North Vancouver, and I often say to folks that North Vancouver is certainly one of the most beautiful ridings in all of Canada, up against the mountains on the Pacific coast. But I would say that this rivals North Vancouver. It's a beautiful place. I had the opportunity to be in Cape Breton last summer for vacation and cycled around the Cabot Trail. I'm not sure there's many places more beautiful in this country than this part of Canada. I would like to. I would like to just recognize the President and thank Karina Häuslmeier, the Deputy Head of Mission and Charge d'Affaires for the Embassy of Germany to Canada, and Marcus Exenberger from H2 Global Foundation for being with us for today's announcement, which I would say, is the culmination of a lot of effort on the part of both the Government of Canada and the Government of Germany. We talk a lot about climate change these days for obvious reasons. Climate change is altering our world's natural environment in a myriad of harmful ways. Last year's wildfire season was instructive in this regard, and just last week I think the images that we saw coming out of Jasper were horrifying and devastating. Events like these are showing us what the future will look like if we fail to tackle the threat of climate change. That is obviously a future that we must work to avoid. At the same time, climate change is creating enormous economic opportunities for countries that are thoughtful, determined, and focused. As we move through the energy transition, those that are thoughtful have the opportunity to seize these things like hydrogen and critical minerals and a range of new opportunity areas that are going to be major areas of growth moving forward. La transformation énergétique mondiale, déjà bien engagée, est à la fois un impératif environnemental visant à protéger la planète pour les générations futures et une opportunité économique d'une ampleur comparable à la révolution industrielle. For Canada to seize the extraordinary opportunities being created by the transition to a net zero future, we must first accept the scientific reality of climate change. And we must then ensure that this informs and shapes Canada's economic strategy. Les gouvernements du monde entier sont de plus en plus nombreux à prendre des mesures. Our American friends are making massive investments at a scale never seen before in growing a clean economy through the Inflation Reduction Act. So are our German and other European friends, our Japanese and South Korean partners, and beyond our democratic friends, competitors such as China are also moving aggressively and highly strategically to seize the economic opportunities associated with the energy transition. It is not a fluke of chance that China is now the #1 developer and deployer of renewable energy technologies, the #1 manufacturer and deployer of electric vehicle technologies, and that it controls much of the critical minerals value chains around the world. That is the product of a thoughtful economic strategy. Here in Canada, we have developed an energy and resource-based strategy in partnership with industry, with labor, and Indigenous peoples to create economic prosperity in a low-carbon world. Implementation of such a strategy is going to look different in different parts of Canada. The major opportunities that exist in British Columbia are going to look different than the ones that exist in Saskatchewan, that are going to look different from the ones that exist in Nova Scotia. Canada's high-level strategy includes, first of all, looking to seize key economic opportunities where Canada can have a comparative advantage in the world in new and accelerating sectors such as critical minerals and critical minerals processing, battery technology, biofuels, nuclear technology, carbon capture and sequestration technologies, renewable energy, electricity generation, and of course hydrogen production, utilization, and export. The second part of the strategy is having a thoughtful approach to ensuring the competitiveness of Canada's oil and gas sector in what will eventually be a declining global market. Such an approach requires aggressive action to reduce emissions from the sector to ensure that Canada will remain competitive in a world that will value the lowest carbon products. It also means enhancing our focus on non-combustion applications of oil, and in the case of natural gas, for ultra-low carbon hydrogen. Thirdly, we need to work to establish electricity networks that will continue to give Canada a significant competitive advantage, and they are, right now, a significant competitive advantage. Canada has an electricity grid writ large across the country that is over 80% non-emitting. That is far ahead of our European friends and is a significant economic competitive advantage. Fourthly, we need to accelerate regulatory and permitting reform to enable good projects to be built more quickly in this country. And finally, our strategy must include furthering economic participation and economic reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. I think you would have seen in the most recent budget the commitment of a $5 billion Indigenous loan guarantee to enable such participation moving forward. Today, I just want to say a few words specifically about hydrogen. It is something on which the federal government, as well as several provinces, are focused. It is an area of significant personal interest to me. I ran a hydrogen-related company for almost a decade, a number of years ago. Certainly, it is a very important economic opportunity here in Nova Scotia. Hydrogen is a clean fuel which can have numerous applications from decarbonizing heavy industry to reducing emissions in parts of our transportation and building sectors and other things. And hydrogen is something that is interesting not only domestically, but as a product to be exported to allies in Europe, Japan, South Korea, and elsewhere to assist their own decarbonization efforts. Nova Scotia is well placed to be an active and successful participant in the hydrogen production space. It possesses enormous onshore and even more enormous offshore wind resources, a dynamic private sector, and highly skilled and motivated workforces. In the summer of 2022, Prime Minister Trudeau and I had the pleasure of welcoming Chancellor Scholz and my friend Vice Chancellor Habeck of Germany to Atlantic Canada. At that time, we formally endorsed the signing of the joint declaration of intent to establish a Canada-Germany hydrogen alliance. The declaration built on the strong relationship that has existed for decades between Canada and Germany. It demonstrated that we are committed to working together to create a policy and regulatory environment that will enable the flow of investment into hydrogen projects and to build and to support the build-out of supply chains on both sides of the Atlantic. And it underlined that we would aim to use production and demand-side incentives to establish a clean hydrogen export economy and transatlantic hydrogen corridors. These developments are important for economic development and for decarbonization here in Canada, but they are also important in the context of Canada supporting the decarbonization efforts of our German friends and in playing a role in enhancing European energy security. Over the past 2 years, Canadian hydrogen project proponents, some of whom are with us here today, have been working hard to make their projects a reality. Several have completed or are in the process of completing detailed engineering design studies, working through regulatory and environmental assessment processes, and moving closer to final investment decisions. Just down the road from us today are the planned hydrogen facilities of Everwind and Bearhead Energy that have the potential to create thousands of construction jobs and hundreds of ongoing, well-paying jobs here in Cape Breton. Provincial governments have also been working hard to do what they can to help realize the hydrogen opportunity. In this regard, I am grateful for the partnership that has been shown by Premier Houston and Premier Furey in this space. The federal government has been doing its part as well. Over the past 2 years, the federal government has taken significant action and announced a number of investments to help seize the hydrogen opportunity. We've announced the Clean Hydrogen Investment Tax Credit, which will provide up to 40% of the capital costs of the cleanest hydrogen production projects. It will also extend a 15% credit to the costs of equipment to convert hydrogen to ammonia, which is of particular benefit to hydrogen export. We launched the $15 billion Canada Growth Fund, which includes several potential supports for hydrogen and other clean fuels through low-interest loans, equity investments, contracts for differences, and offtake agreements. We have committed over $250 million in recent agreements through Export Development Canada to provide 2 major export projects with credit and debt facilities to help de-risk their development. And we are in the process of amending the Atlantic Accords through Bill C-49 to put a regulatory framework in place to enable the development of offshore wind. Nous avons également organisé des sommets avec des sociétés, des entreprises et des experts canadiens et allemandes afin de mettre en évidence le potentiel de ce secteur et d'aboutir à des accords concrets. In March of this year, I was in Hamburg. A number of you were in Hamburg with me, with Vice Chancellor Habeck, to sign an agreement to establish a dedicated bilateral window through the H2 Global Foundation to support commercial hydrogen offtake agreements between Canada and Germany. H2 Global would organize competitive hydrogen auctions between producers and offtakers to help develop a transatlantic hydrogen trade. Early funding provided by each nation through such a window would help to fill any gaps in the commercial pricing of early hydrogen projects. The agreement confirmed Canada's position as a provider of choice to our German ally. It was aimed at securing early market access for competitively priced clean energy products produced by Canadian industry and driven by Canadian workers. And we are here today to continue the momentum towards making this industry a reality. Today, I am pleased to announce that the Government of Canada will be providing up to $300 million to support the operations of this window. We expect this funding will be matched by a similar contribution from Germany. The precise mechanics of the window and the timeline for auctions under the window will require further discussion between the German and Canadian governments, but our hope is that the auctions will take place prior to the end of 2024. Marcus. Building this transatlantic hydrogen trade and the low-carbon economy that it will help enable does not happen on its own or by chance. On the one hand, we can choose to lead by recognizing where the world is heading and aggressively pursuing major areas of economic opportunity. That is the choice this federal government and our German allies have made. On the other hand, we can choose to bury our heads in the sand and pretend that the world is not moving rapidly towards a cleaner and greener future, creating uncertainty and driving away economic investment and well-paying jobs. Without intending to be overly partisan, I would say that this recognition is not one that is yet shared by all federal political leaders in Canada. I would say that the absence of any recognition of the reality of climate change and the absence of any kind of economic plan that is focused on seizing the economic opportunities of a low-carbon future, something that our allies in the United States, in the European Union, and competitors like China have long ago figured out, represents a threat to Canada's future economic competitiveness and its prosperity. The announcement being made today is a big deal, and it is a very good day for Nova Scotia. It is a good announcement for Canada, and I believe it is a good announcement for our friends in Germany. It is a win-win-win. Tout le monde y gagne. It will lead to good, sustainable jobs for working people in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, enhanced energy security for our allies, lower emissions on both sides of the Atlantic. That is precisely what we intended when we signed the Canada-Germany Hydrogen Alliance a couple of years ago. This is delivery on the promise that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Germany made at that time. It is, in my mind, a very good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Wilkinson. And as you said, it's a very big day, and in the Straiten area, we like wins, wins, and wins too, and that's wonderful. Next, I'd like to give the floor to Karina Häuslmeier. She's the Deputy Head of Mission at Canada's Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, to say a few words. Karina?
Thank you. Hello. Bonjour. Thank you for the opportunity to share Germany's perspective on our cooperation with Canada to advance the energy transition. Il y a des gens qui pensent que la diplomatie, c'est négocier les mots et déplacer les virgules. Et finalement, rien se change. When I came to Canada 2 years ago and started working at the embassy, my first task sounded a bit like that: to finalize the negotiations on what was to become the joint declaration of interest on establishing a Canada-Germany hydrogen alliance. But when you, Minister, and Vice Chancellor Habeck signed this in the presence of the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, it already had an effect. The little town of Stephenville, Newfoundland, made the evening news in Germany. Here in Canada, people started talking about the potential of Atlantic Canada to produce offshore wind and green hydrogen. From the outset, all 4 Atlantic provinces have supported this alliance. Partnerships with indigenous communities were formed. For the MOUs were signed between Canadian developers and potential off-takers like Everwind and E.ON, between ports like Halifax and Hamburg, and between Canadian provinces and German Länder. I had the pleasure to accompany a delegation from Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania to Nova Scotia, from Hamburg to Newfoundland and Labrador, and from the German Parliament just a few weeks ago to both provinces. Several Canadian delegations visited Germany to get a first-hand impression of developments in offshore wind and hydrogen. This March, Vice Chancellor Habeck had the pleasure to host you, Minister, and a lot of you who are here today, in Hamburg for a discussion with project developers, off-takers, and investors. Today, we can be sure the Canada-Germany Hydrogen Alliance is not just pure words in a document. It is a dense network of people that we managed to connect in the past 2 years. People who believe in the idea of a transatlantic supply chain for clean hydrogen. People who realize the potential of this win-win-win situation for both our countries and for reaching our global goals to combat climate change and to decarbonize our industries. People like the mayor of a town I met on one of my trips to the region who said, "This alliance unites us and gives us hope." Local chiefs who I met who were telling me this is our chance for economic reconciliation. Since the summer of 22, we have seen many encouraging signs that Canada is serious about advancing the clean hydrogen economy, be it the various tax credits, the legislation to develop offshore wind, or new strategies and targets in the provinces. Today, I want to assure you that Germany is equally committed. Just a week ago, the federal government adopted the import strategy for hydrogen and its derivatives like ammonia. This strategy is a key signal to our international partners, like Canada, as it will contribute to better security for investments made here. By 2030, Germany expects demand of hydrogen and derivatives to be at around 100 terawatt hours, and imports will account for around 50 to 70%. With the transition towards climate neutrality, by 2045, we expect these numbers to rise by at least factor 5. The strategy underlines measures to build the necessary import infrastructures by pipeline and ship and the hydrogen core network. For hydrogen infrastructure projects alone, the federal government and the Länder have earmarked around 4.6 billion euro in public funding. With a mix of instruments, Germany supports reliable demand. Carbon contracts for difference incentivize the conversion of conventional industrial plants into climate-friendly ones. The H2 Global instrument, with its double-sided auction mechanism, links and synchronizes international supply with demand in Germany. Just recently, the results of the first global auction were published and gave important price signals in an evolving market. And thank you also to Markus Exenberger from the foundation who came here just for this event. Because we believe that Canada is a prime partner, the German government offered to jointly make use of this instrument and to co-fund a dedicated Canada window. We very much welcome that the Canadian government has decided to match the German offer so that up to 600 million Canadian dollars will be available in total. Today's announcement signals both governments are determined to support transatlantic hydrogen trade. We are one step closer to the first shipment of green ammonia across the Atlantic. I personally hope to see it happening while I'm still in Canada, and I wish you all good luck for working on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karina. And just some parting words, and then we'll open up questions for the media, and Brenna will facilitate that. Again, thank you so much for coming today. I think it's been said by all the folks up here, this is a pretty big deal. And I've said time and time again that big things are happening in rural Canada. This is an example of it. Big things that are connected to the global side of things. And I couldn't be any more prouder of the companies that are part of this, the municipalities that are represented here throughout Cape Breton and northeastern Nova Scotia, First Nations leadership that is here, but also the partnership that we have with Germany and Minister Wilkinson. It's not in my script here, so don't worry, I'm not going to go completely off script. But I want to acknowledge your leadership in all of this, having someone that has an intense background and passion for seeing the challenges, but turning those challenges an opportunity and bringing people together, and Karina and your people on your side of things. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. And also, by the way, we wanted to show you the power of wind. so we had the flags do their thing. Give first-hand experience, right? Brenna, if you want to come up or you're there, and we can, if there's any questions from the media, both here and online, and I'll hand it over to you, Brenna.
Merci, bonjour tout le monde. My name is Brenna Walsh, and I'm a policy advisor and the Atlantic Regional Advisor on Minister Wilkinson's team. We have media here in person and joining virtually, as Mike just mentioned. So I will take questions from those joining virtually first, which I have here on my phone, and then I'll turn to those who are here today in person. We have about 10 minutes. So we'll have time for one question per person. Please state your name, which publication you will be representing, and your question. On peut prendre les questions dans les deux langues nationales dans la langue nationale de votre choix, and we will take questions in either national language of your choice. On vous demande votre nom, la chaîne et de votre question. On a 10 minutes pour les questions. And as I said, I'll start with some of the virtual questions first. Et on vous demande de donner la signe si vous avez une question ici. I'll just ask you to raise your hand if you have a question here with you. So I'm going to start with a question from Marc Babin from Radio-Canada. Je vais lire la question en français et en anglais, mais on veut une réponse en français pour cela. Beaucoup d'experts estiment qu'il y a une grande perte d'énergie dans la transformation de l'hydrogène ainsi qu'une énergie de transition. Est-ce que c'est une bonne idée d'investir autant dans une énergie qui ne pourrait pas être qu'éphémère? Many experts believe that there is a good deal of energy lost in the transformation of hydrogen, and that it is a transitional energy. Is this a good idea to invest so much in an energy that could be so short-lived?
And you want me to respond in English or in French?
French, as it's from Radio-Canada.
Okay, maybe I'll start in English and then I'll go into French. So, first of all, I think people have to understand that there are different pathways to get to hydrogen, and each of the pathways has different positives and different challenges. One, which is the focus of the work here, is on using renewables, wind, in order to generate hydrogen through electrolysis. And another, which is something that provinces like Alberta are more focused on, is to actually produce hydrogen from natural gas, either by capturing the carbon and sequestering it, or by using a particular kind of process that allows the carbon to drop out as a solid. In the context of the decarbonization, particularly of industrial applications, there are very few choices than hydrogen to displace natural gas. There are some industrial processes where one can look to electricity, but by and large, you have very little choice. So the challenge for us is to make hydrogen as cost-effective as possible. Yes, there are losses in the conversion process, but it is to make hydrogen as cost-effective as possible to ensure that we actually can displace natural gas, which is required if we are to fight climate change. But I would also say that in the case of offshore wind in particular, we have an enormous resource from which we are deriving zero value right now. At the end of the day, there is more than enough onshore and offshore wind to decarbonize the Nova Scotia grid and to be able to actually convert and produce hydrogen for export and for domestic use. The alternative is simply to let the wind blow and not extract value from it. I'm not sure why that would make any sense at all. So the losses issue, I think, is a bit beside the point. C'est important de comprendre qu'il y a les différentes méthodes dans lesquelles on peut produire l'hydrogène. Ici, c'est l'hydrogène qui vient des renouvelables, particulièrement les éoliens. Et bien sûr, il y a les pertes quand on utilise l'électrolysis, mais on a une ressource avec le vent, particulièrement sur mer, que nous pouvons utiliser pour extraire la valeur. Et aussi, je veux dire qu'il n'y a pas beaucoup d'autres choses qu'on peut utiliser pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre dans les secteurs industriels. Et je crois que les pertes sont un petit peu à côté de le grand chose que nous pouvons faire. il y a une grande opportunité économique, mais c'est aussi important pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre.
Just looking for hands from the room, or not the room, wherever this outdoor lovely space. Yes.
Hi, my name's Luke Diamond. I'm with the Cape Breton Post. Obviously, the money here today is to reinforce that partnership between Canada and Germany. It's a lot of money. And I'm curious, there's some local interest in the sale of consumption of green hydrogen. Does the money here today open up more avenues for some possible local usage of this resource?
So I think it is important that we are thinking about domestic use of hydrogen, and it's not just an export opportunity. And there are significant opportunities for the utilization of hydrogen domestically here in Nova Scotia, but certainly we're already seeing it in places like Alberta, where they actually are producing hydrogen for the purpose of displacing natural gas in the oil and gas sector. And so I do think there are opportunities. Those opportunities would actually allow businesses like the ones that I mentioned in my speech to be able to scale their business, which obviously helps to reduce costs overall. But I would say that the main instrument that we have put into place to enable that are the investment tax credits, where we're willing to pay up to 40% of the capital cost of these projects. The money we are announcing today is dedicated to a window that is a bilateral window between Canada and Germany for the purpose of exports, so it is separate from domestic utilization. But certainly as you build volume for export, you're also bringing down costs for hydrogen that can be used domestically, so they are related.
That's, I also want to add to that, it's also part of the German philosophy. It's, we are kickstarting a market here, which will then have effects globally, is also have effects here in Canada and build value here in Canada. So it's not just the bilateral window supports the export, but it supports a whole industry that is going to be generated. And so our philosophy when we fund this instrument is in this bilateral window, but also globally, is that this will contribute to economic opportunities also in our partner countries.
I'll take in the green first.
Yes, Minister Wilkinson, Adam Cook, CBC News, Cape Breton. Just wanted to pick up on the discussion from the previous question. Nova Scotia is trying to decarbonize itself in terms of its energy production, especially in terms of where coal is being produced here in the province. Is your department actively involved with the provincial government in terms of making sure that not only is the supply of green hydrogen available for international markets, but that it's going to help your own government's deadlines for getting provinces like Nova Scotia off coal and other fossil fuels?
I'm just going to quickly repeat so that those online can hear. The question was following up on the last question. This is primarily for hydrogen for international markets, but Nova Scotia needs to reduce its emissions, getting off coal. What is the conversation and involvement of the federal government in that effort?
Yeah, so I mean, you are referring in particular to the electricity grid, the need to phase out coal and ultimately to get to a non-emitting grid. And the answer to are we collaborating with the province is yes. I think Dave McGregor, who was at a meeting with me and Minister Rushton yesterday talking about these issues, would validate that. We had a meeting a few months ago where Premier Houston came to Ottawa to actually discuss all of these issues. And we made a commitment and issued a statement at the end of that meeting that said that we would work in partnership. The federal government would support the efforts of the government of Nova Scotia to move towards the non-emitting grid that also would have abundant sources of power that allow you to attract new industry to the province. And that we would do that in line with the kinds of timelines that exist under the Clean Electricity Regulation, which is being developed at the federal level. We are actively engaged in conversations on the Clean Electricity Regulation with the government of Nova Scotia, and we are working very hard to ensure that we keep our commitment to support Nova Scotia in the work that's being done. Yesterday, I announced $200 million in federal funding for a number of wind projects and battery storage projects here in Nova Scotia, which was a big deal. We have announced a number of projects prior to that, and I'm quite confident that we will be announcing more. But the partnership with the province on the electricity system has been a very strong one.
Go ahead.
Mr. Wilkinson, Jennifer Peterson from the Halifax Examiner. Can you put a little meat on the bones about how this competitive auction process will assist companies like Everwind and Bearhead get their projects off the ground? I don't quite understand the A-B.
So the question from the Halifax Examiner, could you put a little bit of meat on the bones of how the auction process will help companies like Everwind and Bearhead advance their projects?
So, and Marcus will correct me where I go wrong here, but I think it's important to understand how new markets open up and how technology evolution happens. And perhaps the best example of this is what happened with the development of wind power itself. Wind right now is perhaps the most cost-effective way to generate electricity. 30 years ago, it was much, much more expensive than alternatives. And the reason that we actually got to where we are today is largely because of the government of Germany, which actually put in place a tariff structure that was willing to pay more for the early part of the wind development, such that you could actually evolve the technology and cost reduce it, and you could actually get to larger manufacturing volumes of wind turbines, so that you actually brought the costs down. And as I say today, wind in Alberta is 3 cents a kilowatt hour when they actually go out to bid. Most cost-effective way to generate electricity. So this is essentially the same kind of thing, where we are looking to, in the early stage, create a market to allow for early entry into the market for products that are probably a little bit more expensive than what the commercial system can bear at the present time. Allow for volume to be built, which will help to reduce costs, allow for further cost reduction of the offshore wind platforms and the electrolysis systems to get to the point where onshore wind is today. And so the auctions essentially will be a bid into by users, industrial users, of a price and a volume that they actually want to pay. And we will look then at what is the price that can be offered by producers, including the folks that are with us today. And we will use the $600 million to fill the gaps and to ensure that you can actually contract for the hydrogen. This is an early market development thing. And Canada is the first country, as I understand it, that Germany has actually contracted with. We are going to be the first in the world to do this. By leading the market, you actually help to create the market and to actually be first to get down the cost curve, and that's exactly what this is intended to do.
CBC asking how many Canadian companies will benefit from this?
Well, I would say those that are leading at this point in terms of the development of their thoughts and processes, their environmental assessments and their engineering designs are probably going to be the ones that access this first. The precise number of companies is impossible to say at this point because it depends a little bit on what the gap is and therefore what the volume that this 600 million will actually attach to is. But certainly our hope is that it's a number of companies that will be able to access this, and we will see how it plays out through the competitive auction process.
Anyone that I've missed? Okay, thanks very much. Then that concludes the media availability today.
Thank you. Can we take a picture or?
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we'll go first. Are we taking a picture by the remaining flags that we have available?